Okay, so now if you are familiar, if you're already on my website, then you can ignore what I'm about to say. If you're not on my website is www.danceofthecosmos.com, and you can find this video there. If you're already on YouTube, then you might want to go check out my website because I try to categorize and keep everything together. So now, with that being said, so today's video, we're going to talk about chart analysis and kind of the ways to go about it and kind of some very important lessons to know about looking at a chart and being able to see this, being able to see information and be able to make predictions for people. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about analysis and we're going to talk about intuition, which are basically the two sides of the same spectrum. They're just kind of like the opposite ends of that same spectrum that has to deal with chart analysis, making predictions, counseling people, using astrology. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here talking about astrology. Now, with that being said, so when we're talking about analysis, what we're talking about is using techniques, which means, whatever, that's looking at planetary dignities, that's seeing Rashi aspects to signs and houses and planets, planetary aspects, Lajatati Avashtas, yogas. And when it comes to yogas, there's so many different types of yogas out there. So, and just seeing how things are playing together. So that's just 4, and then 5, maybe we're looking also deeper into the Vargas about the specified part of life that it is that we're trying to gather more information about. So now with that being said, so that's like a left brain way, because we basically have 2 ways that we're going to look at things. Is going to be the left hand, the left side brain, and the right side of the brain. The left side of the brain is going to be all that analysis. It's going to be listing. It's going to be seeing how things are stacking up. And it's going to be about judging and assessing and going through information and sorting through information. Then the right side of the brain is not that. The right side of the brain is not judging. It's just perceiving and finding meaning just by perception alone, and it comes to you and you say it. And sometimes it's more accurate, and sometimes you don't know. You're like, you'll probably meet somebody in January. If that just comes to you, you just felt like saying that, and then you sit there and then you use your left side of the brain and you're looking at the transits, you're looking at the dashas, you're looking at Varshafala, you're looking at everything that you could possibly think to look at. You're looking at the Jaimini Rashi dashas and all the different Vargas related in the Saptamsha and the Navamsha and the Rashi chart, and you're trying to find out. You're like, why did I say January? And then they meet someone in January. You're like, I would have said, gosh, I probably wouldn't have said 2 years until they came into, Jupiter Sun Dasha. That seemed like that was going to be the most logical time. So it's very interesting with astrology when it comes to making those predictions, when it comes to tying it all together, that you realize that intuition and assessment are basically 2 opposite sides of the coin, and they should be working to develop each other in a way. And what I mean by that is that you can lead, once you've learned how to use a technique, once you've learned everything about Shadbala, and you know it's how important it is and how to use it in a chart, and there may be times where you might do 20 charts in a row without even thinking to use Shadbala, and then you might, and everything worked fine. You had no problems. You just didn't bother to look at anything regarding Shadbala, really. And you're like, okay, helped this many people, made this many predictions or whatever, depending on whether you do counseling or predicting or relationship astrology. You're not even using the Shadbala. And then all of a sudden, you get drawn. You look at this one chart. You're like, wow, I'm going to look at their Shadbala. I feel like I need to analyze their Shadbala. So this is where the right brain comes in. The perceptive side comes in and says, hey, use this technique. So it's like the right brain comes in and hands it off to the left brain. The left brain uses that Shadbala. You talk to that person, and you give them the information, I guess, that they probably needed to hear from you. So the right brain served the left brain. So, and then you have the analysis and the assessment. And sometimes when you do your analysis and your assessment, and then you just look at a chart. So you take that information, you bring it into your brain, and then you look at the chart, and then all of a sudden, and this is how the left brain works with the right brain, is a lot of times I'll look at a chart, and actually I'll kind of use my right brain for that brief flash, the instant I see it, to see what that chart speaks to me about. and then I'll use my left brain, go out through all the calculations. But I basically do two types of readings. I'll do readings for people on the spot. I can do on the spot readings. They're not that great. And the reason they're not that great is I don't have enough time to really digest. I mean, really, when it comes, there's so much information in a chart. I need time to process it, digest it, and it helps to analyze, and it helps to use my intuition. So that's one way, is to just look at a chart and talk to somebody about it. But the way I typically do readings for people, the way I prefer to do readings for people, is I prefer to sit with their chart for about a week, 2 weeks. And the reason why is because I like to have a chance to go through and use multiple techniques. And then I like to also have the chance to just sit there and let that information digest so I can integrate it. So I'll be going for a walk, I'll be away from my computer, and then all of a sudden I might think of something while I'm on that walk. I see a butterfly, and all of a sudden I start thinking about, oh, maybe this person's going to be an artist. Oh, they've got this and this and this and this. It's like all of a sudden it's like boom. So that's the way the left brain can kind of work to help the right brain, is that the information, after you give it a chance to... So when I talk about the first dimension, I talk about information and integration, and that's kind of why, is it's like, let's pull as much, use the left hand, pull as much information as I can out of this chart, and then use the right brain to actually like perceive some things, to kind of congeal a picture together that might be harder to explain than just by looking at all the individual pieces. So with that being said, there's also a saying that I use when it comes to astrology, and this is kind of what I stick by. I stick to this thing, and it's really funny to me because it's like a conundrum, and it's kind of a contradiction in terms. I like things like that, I guess. It's like a paradox. So anyway, so what it is never make a prediction. This is what I say, is never make a prediction based off just one technique. Make sure you see confluence of multiple techniques to make it happen. And then also, don't let a technique get in the way of making a good prediction. So in other words, if you feel like saying, I think this thing is going to happen then, this is what's happening with the chart off of your direct perception, don't sit there and then undermine your perception with your analysis. These things should work together. Because analysis requires, if you're just going to go purely left brain on a chart, then you're going to need confluence. This is the most important part when it comes to chart analysis, is to never be making a prediction for somebody or making an assessment or a judgment or an understanding of a chart by just finding one thing. So if you look at it and you see Shadbala's low, just being like, okay, this is a person that isn't confident. Because there's other things. I mean, perhaps that sun is actually very well placed in the chart. Perhaps it's very prominent in the chart. Or perhaps they have a lot of other planets that are actually helping that sun to achieve its vision. Maybe they just have a lower vision, but they're really good. Maybe it's a little more of a narrow vision. Maybe they're a little bit more of a... Maybe they don't use their solar energy quite the way, which is what that one thing was showing. But then you're looking at all these other techniques, and you're like, well... This shows that things are just going to come to them. They've got all these planets in trines. They've got all these planets, trine lords and angles, angle lords and trines, and they're conjunct, and they're not with any of the Dushtana houses. I don't know. That's just like one technique right there, right? So you're starting to see that it's like, it's not just one thing that's going to tell you how things are going to play out. But at the same time, when you get an idea of how things are going to play out, but if you have an idea that's concurrent, you just have a feeling in your gut. And intuition, by the way, however you choose to define that word, is just all I'm really referring to when I'm using that word. I'm using it as a blanket term for anything that doesn't involve left-brained analysis and assessment. However you come about that, maybe you feel it in your gut. Maybe you feel it in your heart. Maybe you just know it in your mind. Maybe it's an instinct. However you want to describe that, that's what I'm talking about with the right brain. I'm using the intuition. I'm using the word intuition to kind of say pure perceptive ability. I'm using the left side of the brain and the analysis to just be like facts, 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 information, 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 gather, 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 and figure it out that way. So with that being said, just be aware of that, to make sure that you find things. If you're going to just use analysis skills, you're just going to use techniques, to make sure that you're finding it stack up. Make sure you're finding multiple things. So for example, when I mentioned that sun with like a low Shadbala, And then at the same time, then you see the sun is in a Dushtana. They got a lot of planets in the sixth house. The sixth lord, maybe it's in the first. So now you're seeing it's like the person doesn't have the most capacity to necessarily project themselves out into the world and to make their vision come to fruition. And then at the same time, they've got the sixth lord in the first, who's Saturn, who's causing delays and makes them feel like they're incapable of doing it. And then they have their Makaraka in the sixth, which is about work and dealing with everyday life and the mundane. So here's this person, not only does it have a low sun, but this person also has more indications that are showing difficulties in bringing about the things that they're trying to achieve in their lifetime. So that's what we mean by confluence. And I would still look at more factors than just that. Those are, what did I mention? 3 factors right there to kind of get the same idea for what's going on. So look at multiple things. But at the same time, if you would have just come up with that, if you would have just looked at that, just open your eyes, you see the chart, you're like, wow, I think that this is a person that's, yeah, this person probably has trouble making things happen. And then you can, so then you just already have that. You're going to be like, yeah, you're probably going to struggle. They're going to ask you, yeah, when am I going to get my job? It's like, I don't know. It's going to be really hard for you. I mean, you're going to have to deal with the little things in life. Now, if you just thought about that from here, because you heard the way they're asking that question, like they got a lot emotionally involved in it, sometimes what you can also do, I mean, because what the right side of the brain is also listening. So when you hear someone ask you a question, I think it's very important, because there's a lot of times, if you're an astrologer and you know a lot of techniques and you've been shown a lot of informational things with charts, when people ask you a question, you might immediately, the calculator might already be turning on. You know, the computer's firing up. They're asking it, and you're like, okay, they're asking about when I should look for the third lord. Oh, what's the sixth lord doing? What's the 10th lord doing? You might start thinking about that, but I think it's also very important when people are asking you questions to turn on the right brain first. Shut the left brain off, turn on the right brain when people are thinking. Be there and listen, and really listen to what they're asking, because a lot of times there's so much more information that you can pull out of really when they're like, when am I going to find a job? Or, you know, should I switch between this career and that career? You know, people might ask you a question like that. And what you want to find out is, there's probably more information you should find out before even trying to find that in the chart. Because if they're asking, am I going to go from this career to this career, you know, it's like, are you having problems with that career? Are you having difficulties with that career? You know, is this person really doing this because I see that they're not confident in themselves? Like, you see that there's a lack of confidence in them. And so it's like, if there's a lack of confidence, if you're sensing that, if you're here and you're listening to what they're saying and you're sensing a lack of confidence, you can look here, here, and here and see when these best timing periods are going to be, the 10th house, the 11th house, or whatever. But what's going to happen is that person just isn't, it's like they're lacking in that confidence. Like, you need to build that confidence. You know, so I mean, just be aware when you're answering questions. That's how you can use the right brain also when you're doing consultations with people, is use that right brain to listen. Use that right brain to listen and be like, what am I really hearing right now? Am I really hearing that all they want to know is, I have option A and then there's option B. Should I take option A or option B? I don't really care. They're basically about the same, or maybe this one's going to be a little bit harder. Maybe this one's a little bit harder to stay with. Either or. So I mean, you have to really judge. You really have to use that right brain to listen. So that's what I say. Use that right brain to listen. Then, if you need to, use that left brain, because it's so important to be aware of what is being asked of you as an astrologer. Because if you sit there and you just look at the left side of the brain, you know, you just turn on the calculator and that person asks you, well, what should I go from this job to this job? What can end up happening is you can look at that and you're looking at 10th and 11th when, you know, these things are getting involved with, but you're not looking at the third house. When are they going to take the effort, the initiative, and the courage? And what does their third house matters? Their Mars in the D27, which is the Nakshatra Tamsha. It also has another name, the Bhamsha, you know, the chart of strengths, you know, seeing how they're doing there, see how it's doing, Mars is doing in the Drakana, see how the third house is doing, the third lord. So, a lot of different things, the third house from Mars, you want to see how all these things are being influenced, Rashi aspect, Lajatadiya Vashta. And so you're thinking about, like, this person's going to make a change, but then you also want to look at, you might want to look at the second house, yes, the second house. You might want to look at the second house and see how their ability, how well they are to manage their responsibilities in life. and the time periods of this. Because if you're talking about this person's like, yeah, I want to do this right now, but should I take this other job where I'm going to have to train, but I can make more money? And see, that's the other thing. So you would find that out because you were perceptive. You're like, should I take this or this? Should I start this new job? And then you're like, well, gee, is this a money issue? And then they're like, yeah, this is a money thing. So you're perceptive. You saw that there was some financial need that was there. And so you're like, yeah. Then you look at the second house and you're like, well, you're not going to want to start right now because as bad as, as much as you may not like option A that you're currently with, if you try and go to option B where you're going to be training, you're going to be making less money, you're going to be investing more, but you're also going into a bad second house period right now. So you should probably stick this out, wait till that passes, and you get into this next period in 2 years. It's going to be better. And that's why I would recommend to do this. That's what I think. So just be aware, use your right brain to listen to people, then use your left brain to make it happen, and just be present. That's what the right brain is for, be present. And in the same time, the right brain is also for making those intuitive predictions and assessments, whereas the left brain is about looking at all the little fine details and what is actually existing in reality, where the 9 dots are in the 12 boxes of the chart. So, with that being said, never make a prediction just based off of one technique. Find confluence, and never let a technique get in the way of making a good prediction. So just remember that, follow that little conundrum, understand the different sides of the brain and the way that it go about in assessment versus intuition. And I hope that this is something that you find valuable, and namaste. Thank you.